Unlocking the Void is back! Welcome to FPL Mate, my name is Dan and I'm very excited to say that the big series is back for the new season, new and improved and better than ever for helping you with those FPL decisions. Let's get going. Okay, so here it is, the new format for Buy, Sell, Keep, Avoid, and we're doing things slightly differently this season. I think it's going to be really useful for you guys. So what we're going to be doing this season is kind of combining the tier list videos with the Buy, Sell, Keep, Avoid videos, and we're going to be categorizing players based on whether you should keep them or sell them, and separately, we're going to look at players as whether you should buy them or avoid them. So it's all on a scale. The first players that we're going to talk about today are going to be players that you perhaps already own, and we're going to see whether you should keep them in your team or remove them from your team. And we're going to tier list them all with some data and fixtures to back it up as well. So here is what we have so far, and you can see Havertz, Watkins and Isak are three players that I think if you have them, you should keep them. And by the way, guys, all of the players that we're talking about today, or at least most of the players we are talking about today, are players that are being heavily sold. So although it might seem a little bit mad to sell a Havertz, for example, a lot of people are selling him. Watkins and Isak, a little bit more understandable why you might want to sell them. Haven't quite performed as of yet this season, but with both Watkins and Isak, I think they have some really good fixtures coming up. Watkins faces Leicester, Everton, Wolves, and then Ipswich, which is a phenomenal run of fixtures. And Isak, Spurs next, then Wolves, and then it gets a little tougher with Fulham and Man City. But certainly, these are two players that really proved themselves as FPL assets last season, so I don't want to judge them too quickly. There's a few other players people seem to be selling, such as Chris Wood. After his last game where he only scored 1 point with that yellow card, thought he was a bit unlucky maybe at that last game as well. We've seen already this season he's had 3 big chances to score. That is higher than most other forwards in the game, which is really good. 0.92 XG. So out of all of the players people are commonly selling in FPL this week, Wood actually has the best XG numbers of any of them. So definitely a player I would look to keep for this next game week. Wolves at home is a good fixture. Now, João Pedro is going to be a monitor. And as we get to this monitor category, Wood is also in the monitor category. But as we get into this category, they are players that you probably can afford to keep, but if you feel very strongly about them, I can understand why you would sell them. For example, if you've got another player you really want to buy into your team and you have to find someone to sell, well, maybe one of the monitors could be a sell if you don't have any of the players in the actual sell category. So João Pedro is a player to monitor, doing really well so far this season, penalty taker as well, but he does have Arsenal away this week. So I'm not sure I would love to keep him necessarily, but at the same time, he's fine to hold on to. So no real need to sell João Pedro for this game week. We'll talk about buying him when we get to the buy and avoid section. Mateta and Xerxes you could also possibly afford to keep, but Solanke, Darwin, Tony, these are firmly in the sell category. Solanke, pretty likely to miss this next fixture. We'll get more information as we get closer to the deadline, but Newcastle away and Arsenal at home are 2 tough fixtures for him. Darwin is a rotation risk right now, so I think he's another player who I think is just very easy to sell, not getting enough minutes at the moment. And Tony could be on the way out of Brentford, and even if he does stay, is he going to come straight back into the team? I'm not sure, but it's looking likely that Tony will be leaving Brentford, so a pretty easy sell if you do still have him in your team. Now, Xerxes came from the Serie A to the Premier League, but how about going from the Premier League to Serie A? If there's any Italian league fans out there, I have some great news, because the Serie A fantasy game is now available as an app on your mobile devices, so it's easier to play than ever. It works just like FPL. You pick your favorite 15 players from a limited budget and choose your squad each week for the best results. And if you feel like you've already conquered FPL, why not test your knowledge on a new league? Download the app using the link at the top of the description, and if you want, you can also join my mini league using code CA6XL355, and I look forward to seeing you guys over there. Let's conquer the Serie A Italian league next. Moving to midfielders next, and there's a big player who I think must be kept, and that's Eberechi Eze. And I know a lot of people are selling him because they are, they're just frustrated with the fact that he hasn't got any returns yet. But as you can see, his numbers are really good. 0.89 XG and 12 shots taken so far this season is really, really high numbers. And he's actually been very unlucky not to get results so far. A goal disallowed in game week 1, which probably shouldn't have been disallowed. And in game week 2, hit the woodwork and almost scored there as well. Going into the next fixtures, they're still pretty good for Eze, with Chelsea, Leicester, Man United and Everton in the next 4. So we've still got some nice fixtures. The numbers are there. And although it's very easy to pick and choose players based on previous results in terms of points, when we look at these underlying numbers, it does suggest to us that good things are coming. Saka is another player I would look to keep. He's been doing really well so far this season. And Phil Foden is a player I may regret putting in the keep category, but he was unfortunately ill last game week. So it's one of those random circumstances where, unfortunately you get unlucky with a player. But when he's available, he is one of the star players of Man City. He's one of the star players of the entire league. So I think you can still trust him when he is on the pitch. And I think good things will come from Foden eventually. Into the monitor category, Gordon, Garnacho, Fernandes and Ødegaard are players you can maybe afford to keep, but you could possibly sell as well. In particular, the Manchester United guys are putting up some really good underlying numbers. And I've included on today's graphics expected points. And that's a really good benchmark to kind of get an idea of what the XG combined with the XA, combined with the shots on target, combined with the minutes, and how many points a player has been expected to get based on all of this data together. And you can see Garnacho and Bruno Fernandes actually super high up. They've got some of the best expected points numbers in the entire Premier League so far. However, they face Liverpool next, and I'm not sure they're super clinical players. They have historically been frustrating players and streaky players to own. So against Liverpool, I can understand why you might sell them. I don't think they are must-sell players. Ødegaard, a little bit disappointing. His underlying numbers suggest he should have got a little bit more than he has so far, but it's nothing crazy high. And as for Rashford, Jacob Murphy and Nkunku, due to a combination of poor form and minutes risk, I think all 3 players can easily be sold this week. So I can't believe I'm saying this, but people are selling Trent Alexander-Arnold, and I firmly disagree with that. He seems to be the best defender to own in FPL so far. Fair enough, he hasn't quite scored as many points as Pedro Porro, but he's certainly doing really well, very creative at the moment. 1.53 expected assists already for Trent, which is absolutely mad, and the good fixtures do keep coming from here. Clean sheets looking pretty good for Liverpool as well. They're putting up the best defensive numbers in the Premier League so far this season. You can see we've got non-penalty expected goals as a stat for our defenders, and Liverpool only 0.8 non-penalty expected goals against so far this season. Yeah, really, really low. Of course, they've kept 2 clean sheets. Gvardiol, really unlucky not to keep a clean sheet last game week, so I would still look to keep him, even though he hasn't been as attacking as we would perhaps hope so far, but he's not a player that you need to sell necessarily. And Pedro Porro, I appreciate that Spurs will probably concede against Newcastle away in game week 3, but he does have a really good attacking number so far. 0.11 XG, 0.43 expected assist there. Not quite Trent levels, but still very, very impressive stuff for a 5.5 million defender. And I think Newcastle, considering that they've shown pretty weak defensive form so far this season, I think there's definitely an opportunity there for Spurs to maybe get some goals there. And Pedro Porro has every chance of being involved in that. Anderson is now moved to Fulham. Didn't play last game week because he'd only just signed for Fulham, but playing in the League Cup gives us some confidence that he may be a valuable Fulham defender to have, even though you maybe bought him as a Crystal Palace defender. Ipswich Town up next. It's a nice fixture. Barco, no pressure to sell Barco. He is price locked now that he has left the Premier League. So you can just leave him on your bench and monitor him until you need to make a transfer there. But there's probably very, very low chance that you need to make a transfer there. Burn, probably still nailed, but I'm not convinced by the Newcastle defense right now. They're putting up some really poor defensive numbers. You can see here 3.9 non-penalty goals against so far this season. It's a miracle that they've even kept a clean sheet. It's a miracle that they've only conceded 1 goal so far this season. Some might say that Bournemouth game in game week, Bournemouth goal in game week 2 should have counted, but that is a discussion for another time. Mikolenko, a similar situation with just a poor defence so far this season. Everton are just not popping defensively right now. So I think Mikolenko is almost a sell. I think when Branthwaite comes back, that could be improved a little bit though. But Bournemouth at home, Aston Villa away. I don't think these are amazing fixtures necessarily. So Everton defensive owners could be in trouble once again. We've got Hall with a bit of rotation risk now as well. Anyone owning him could think about selling. Maybe you will keep him because you think he is going to start, but there is some risk there. Walker and Trippier also huge rotation risk players. So they are at the bottom here in the sell category as well. And guys, we're not doing goalkeepers today, but if you do want to see goalkeepers included in the Buy, Sell, Keep, Avoid series in the future, let me know. I just didn't think there was too much to say about goalkeepers, to be honest, and it's pretty boring to talk about them. It certainly was last season when we talked about goalkeepers. I think it got a bit dull, but let me know if you would like that to change for next week's episode. And guys, if you are enjoying this video so far, make sure you do hit the like button if you like the new and improved Buy, Sell, Keep, Avoid, and why not hit subscribe if you haven't done already. I know at least half of you watching are not subscribed, so get that one sorted. Okay, on to the buys and avoids. So these are players that you don't own yet in your FPL team and whether you should pick them up for your squads or not. And let's start off with the obvious guy. Haaland is always going to be a buy if you can afford to get him and if you want to get him in your team. He's always going to be a really good FPL asset, and you can see that his numbers are just better than anyone else in the Premier League so far. 2.12 expected goals, which is really nice. 9 shots, 4 big chances, which is the most in the Premier League right now, and a decent amount of expected points and a decent amount of points there as well. Congratulations, by the way, to anyone who triple captained him in Game Week 2. That worked out really, really well. Havertz, it can also be a buy at 8.1 million. I think the fixtures in the next 2 are good enough, and Leicester in Game Week 6, followed by some more good fixtures in 7 and 8, I think justifies having an Arsenal attacker in your team. So if you are looking for a player in this price bracket, Havertz is absolutely fine to buy right now. Muniz, I know people may be disappointed in him so far this season, but he's another player putting up some really good numbers. 9 shots so far this season, which is the same amount of shots as Erling Haaland, although they have been slightly lower quality chances. But really unlucky not to score in Game Week 2. Maybe Game Week 3 against Ipswich can provide maybe some more goals for him. And moving on to the monitors, Watkins and Isak, I don't know if I would necessarily buy them immediately, but they're certainly okay to buy. I would be looking at certainly monitoring them at the very least. Watkins just has amazing fixtures, but maybe his form hasn't been quite there yet. And Isak, if you don't have him already, you're probably feeling good about the season so far, but we know he can turn it on. Some other players to monitor potentially are Wissa, who although he plays Man City in Game Week 4, the fixtures around that are actually not too bad for Brentford now. So I think he's definitely worth considering if you are going for a cheap forward right now. As for Nicholas Jackson, be careful. I think he is still a player to monitor. I know people will be looking to replace Solanke with a Jackson because they are the same price, but be aware that Chelsea have a lot of attackers right now. They're looking to bring in maybe one of Tony or Osimhen during the final few days of the transfer window as well. And if that happens, Nicholas Jackson could find himself on the bench far more frequently for Chelsea. So yeah, big warning sign on Jackson. In the near future, he could be out of the starting 11, and that's why he's only in the monitor category right now. And as for avoid, we've got 2 Brighton players. If you don't have these Brighton players already, I don't think this week is the right time to pick them up. Away against Arsenal is just the toughest fixture an attacker can have during the entire season. However, in Game Week 4, João Pedro and Welbeck face Ipswich at home. So I think that's going to be a much more interesting game week to have a look at. So despite the fact that they've performed well, they have good numbers against Arsenal, I just don't trust any attacker away against Arsenal. After that, we are going to be talking about these players much, much more, particularly if Welbeck can keep his spot up front, because I don't think that's a guarantee. Vardy also a very popular player that people are buying this week. I would still look to avoid him. I think there are better options around his price. Okay, our midfielder buys are as follows. So Smith Rowe seems to be the safe pick to go for. Everyone is bringing in Smith Rowe who doesn't have him already. He's still got some really nice fixtures to come up. Ipswich, West Ham, Newcastle and Nottingham Forest are the next full fixtures. So still plenty of opportunities to get some more goals. Although I have to warn you guys, the data isn't amazing. It's good, it's definitely solid, but it's not like elite level data. But he's only 5.6 million at the moment. You can't expect to get, you know, Salah numbers for Smith Rowe kind of price. It just doesn't work like that in FPL, unless you're Cole Palmer last season, I suppose. Diogo Jota is also in this category. He has got the best XG of any midfielder so far in the Premier League, which is really, really impressive. More so than, you know, Salah, more so than maybe Luis Diaz at Liverpool as well. So he's doing really, really well, getting plenty of opportunities to score goals and creating a little bit last game week, as we saw as well. 7 shots so far for him is really nice. But how about this? 12 shots for Semenyo so far this season with 0.69 XG and 1.27 expected assists. So a lot of creativity there for Semenyo as well. At 5.5 million, I think he is a dark horse differential that you could go if you are a little bit more of a risky manager. You don't want to go for the same Smith Rowe as everyone else, or maybe you already have Smith Rowe. Semenyo is definitely another option for you. Now, Cole Palmer is in the monitor category, not because he is a, you know, an average pick. He is obviously an elite level pick, but I think that if you don't have Palmer already, I would definitely say think carefully, I guess, before going for him. If you are sacrificing a Saka or a Son, for example, in order to get Palmer, I don't think you are necessarily improving your team too much, particularly when you consider that Palmer is 0.5 more expensive. They're all good assets. You could potentially make the move, but I don't think it is something that you have to do. You know, I wouldn't take a -4 for Palmer. I wouldn't, you know, rush to bring him in for a Saka. So he's a monitor. If you are on a wild card, however, or if Palmer is already in your team, he's an absolutely perfect pick. But doing those 10 million midfielder hokey cokies, I'm not sure it's quite the right time to do that yet. Another differential is Brian and Burmo, with Tony looking likely to leave the team. Southampton at home next, and some pretty decent fixtures after Man City in 4. Well, this could be really, really interesting if you want to go for something a little bit different and can afford his 7 million price tag. I think there's a high upside here, actually, and Brentford have impressed so far in the Premier League. Morgan Rogers, I've put in the monitor category. You can definitely buy him, but I'm not sure he's quite at that level of being a player who you start every game week. Yes, his fixtures are really good, but his underlying data is not so good so far. He looks brilliant when he's playing, but I'm not quite convinced yet that he is the perfect player for FPL. I could definitely see him getting the odd assist or goal throughout the season, but is it going to be regular enough that we can trust him to play every week? Not sure about that one yet. We are still looking to monitor him, but things can quickly change. And Madueke, people are going to be raving about him following his hat-trick in Game Week 2. But as we know with Chelsea, anyone whose name is not Palmer is rotation risk. And actually, we spoke about the likes of Madueke and Jackson and all of the other Chelsea attackers in this week's episode of Stick to FPL. So if you haven't checked out the Game Week 3 episode of the Stick to FPL podcast, make sure you do go and check that out. And we deep dive into the Chelsea midfielders, potential rotation, where everyone can play, and what things are looking likely for the future. He is a monitor for me because of that minutes risk, and honestly, I don't expect a hat-trick from him every week. So far this season, his numbers are only marginally better than Smith Rowe's, but sometimes players can get the big points out of nowhere. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen every week. I can't see him getting a hat-trick against Crystal Palace, but please come back to this video if I'm wrong, and I'll have to eat my words, I suppose. As for De Bruyne, I'm not sure I would go there, to be honest, for future game weeks. Done well so far, don't get me wrong, but there are other 10 million-ish midfielders that I do prefer at this point, and Palmer would be one of them. Saka and possibly Son would be part of those players as well. Kaldu Mitoma, again, another Brighton player, would not look to buy him against Arsenal, but maybe game week 4 we'll talk about him some more because his data is really good so far this season as well. And Savio's data is surprisingly quite underwhelming. Hasn't taken a shot yet, has created a little bit with 0.37 expected assists, but has overperformed with 2 assists. Also worried about Pep Roulette, Pep rotation with Savio, with so many wingers available for Man City next week, particularly if Foden comes back into the team. That could spell some reduced minutes for Savio, so I'm not looking to bring him into my team quite yet. And for those defenders, I'm going to put at the top Robertson, who is a differential who I have included. Really like him for this game week and beyond because surprisingly his numbers are genuinely pretty decent here. 0.3 expected goals so far this season and 0.32 expected assists. So unfortunate to have not got any attacking returns so far. And obviously the clean sheets seem to be there for Liverpool as well. So really nice stuff at 6 million. If you have got Trent already and want to double up, Robertson would be the other Liverpool defender I would go for. And also, if you maybe don't have Trent, but you want to cut some corners, find a player a little bit cheaper, you want to get Trent, but for cheaper, then maybe Robertson is the answer for you. So really like this pick. Konsa is the obvious 4.5 million defender to go for right now with the great fixtures coming up. Of course, we always look at the fixtures first of all when picking defenders because, you know, often the good fixtures correlate with the clean sheets. Gabriel is also on this list as well as a differential. Not too many people are looking to buy Gabriel this week, but I certainly think that Arsenal can keep a clean sheet against anyone. Brighton at home is a good opportunity for a clean sheet. Spurs, I think there's every chance that there could be a clean sheet. And even against Man City, we saw last season and in recent seasons that Arsenal versus Man City games have been typically quite low scoring. And therefore, we could see Arsenal come away from that game with a clean sheet. And after game week 6, the fixtures look great again for Arsenal. So still think he is worth considering for our FPL teams. You know, if you want a goalkeeper like Raya, again, think he's absolutely fine to go for. Monitor Robinson at 4.6 million. His data is not as good as maybe his points have kind of reflected, I guess, particularly in defense. Fulham are not putting up great numbers. 3 non-penalty expected goals against so far, so they have been overperforming there. And yeah, the creative numbers not as good as I was hoping for from Robinson, so he's almost in the buy category, but he is going to be a monitor for me. Perhaps if you're on a wild card, you could bring him in, but I think Konsa looks maybe a little bit more promising for the upcoming run of fixtures. Fast is another monitor player. If you need a 4 million-ish defender, you can go for him. Lewis, still want to monitor him. Not sure about his long-term game time prospects. Pedro Porro, if you don't have him already, would not be rushing to buy him. You could try Pedro Porro for size, but the next 2 fixtures are going to be tough for clean sheets. But of course, we know that he has some attacking potential there. And Romero, yes, he scored last week, but is that going to happen every week? No, it's not. And against Newcastle and Arsenal, I think it's a little bit harder to predict good points from Spurs defenders. So Romero, Van de Ven would not be looking to pick them up for my FPL team in the next 2 game weeks. Maybe from game week 5, we can change our mind on that one. Kilman against Man City is going to be an avoid, and Mazraoui is going to be another avoid. Manchester United facing up against Liverpool, who are an absolute elite attack, as we know. So would not be looking to buy any Manchester United defensive asset for game week 3. But again, from game week 4, maybe we talk about Mazraoui a little bit more. Of course, for a lot of these players, remember guys, this is players who you don't have yet. So if you already have Mazraoui, if you already have Pedro Porro, it's a different conversation if you already have them. I'm just talking about if you don't have these players already and whether you should buy them or not for game week 3 and beyond. But guys, that is going to be all of the players we're talking about today. If there are any players that we didn't speak about in today's video, leave a comment mentioning those players and I'll tell you whether I would buy them, sell them, keep them or avoid them, I guess. And also, if there's any changes you would like to see to this series, please let me know. Obviously, we've changed a lot this year for this Buy, Sell, Keep, Avoid series, and I'm very much open to feedback of how we can make it even better, because I do really want to make this a really useful series on YouTube, releasing every Tuesday for you guys. But that's going to be it for today. Make sure you do drop a like, subscribe if you're new around here, and those Italian football fans, check out Serie A Fantasy using the link in the description, and I will see you later, mates. Bye-bye.